Musik für drei Hörer, which is music for three listeners. The Germans kept on telling me I put this in bad German. In fact, it was exactly what I wanted, the sort of translation of sounds into different languages. I was interested in patterns of sound and verbal sounds in particular. The one thing that's been a constant has been Roger, who's always saying, write me a piece, write me a piece. Now, the first time he asked, we were in Germany, and I said, send me some poems that you'd like me to set. So he sent me some Middle High German texts, which were really exciting. What did I do? I cut all the consonants out. We had this one in the concert. We cut out all the consonants, and he was left playing consonants, and I was supplying all the sound in the middle. And he never forgave me for that, because he'd been expecting these beautiful Middle High German pieces, and he didn't get them. The clavichord, and the clavichord is right over here behind us. The clavichord I had bought in my first year in Germany. I was living in a hostel, which had paper-thin walls, of course, and people in Germany had silence hours. Silence hours were so that people could sleep in the middle of the day, because this was still what you did when you lived in Europe. You had this siesta in the middle of the day. So you had 2 hours silence, and then you had to have silence hours after, well, it varied, but after about 7 in the evening, you had to have only Zimmerlautstärke, which is loudness that only went to the walls of the room and didn't go through the walls. That, I think from about 7 o'clock in the morning, you could make noises, and then stop again about 7 at night, but with those 2 big hours in the middle of the day when I was wanting to work all the time, and of course couldn't. So I couldn't play the piano, but I could play a clavichord. And I spent 2 months' allowance on buying my clavichord. And I literally spent all the money that I had for the next 2 months, and this was scholarship monies and a bit of private money as well. And I bought this clavichord, which would make music Zimmerlautstärke, so that you could only hear it in the room. I mean, you can barely hear it in the room. There's a single-string clavichord, so it was very quiet. And so I couldn't actually practice the piano a lot, because I was still 50% pianist, 50% composer. I couldn't practice a lot, but I could do certain amounts of work on it, and I could compose using it, listening to sounds that were all very tiny, and then making tiny noises on the page. I found many, many different ways of playing the strings. The noise of the fingernail running over wound strings, and different materials, needles and breath, and so on. Sound, I found each note you could produce 2 sounds from. The sound when you depressed the key, and also a sound when you let the key lift or spring up, when you lifted the finger very quickly off it. And so you get the sounding length of the string, but also the full length of the string, because of course the sounding length of the string is dependent on where the tangent is that makes the sound. And I could get both that sound and the length of the string, the full length of the string as well. So there are a lot of very tiny differences in I was going to say an intonation, that's not what I want, of the different characters of sound that the strings would make. And I had also recently been in Paris, where I'd met a French musician who'd sold me 3 drums. He was French-Arabian, and he'd sold me 3 drums with zebra skin tops. They smelt terrible. They obviously had just come straight off the animal. But they also were because they were animal skin, they were very soft and gentle sounds, interesting sounds, and they got brought into this composition, which became the tiny vocal sounds, the tiny instrumental drum sounds, and the tiny clavichord sounds. And this piece created a great deal of curiosity around Germany, because nothing like this had ever been thought of before. People begged, may I use your instrumentation, and may I use that combination of instruments elsewhere. So I had 14 pages of score, 27 pages of instructions. It's never been played by anybody else. We've played this piece quite a lot. We played it at a number of festivals. We played it with Willie Southgate doing the percussion part, who was an old friend of ours. He was about 3 years ahead of me at university, and so we had a lot to do with him at a certain stage. So in New Zealand, it's probably had 3 or 4 different rounds of performance. It was played in Dunedin in the early days. It's been played here. It's been played in Kerry at the summer school, at a couple of summer schools. So no, it's had a life of its own, and it's always been a bit of an ear opener for people, and I say that really meaningfully, because we've had to get very close and listen very hard to be able to hear all the different sounds in it. So it's quite a fascinating piece. Well, you see, in New Zealand it was all 12-tone music, and 12-tone wasn't even total serial. I learned about total serial when I got over there and went for a while, total serial, but you know, for us serial music wasn't the new big thing, and it was the big disappointing thing when I got back to New Zealand, that everybody was still doing serial music, which is so boring and so ugly. When I got into it, I was at university, and you know, we had to learn that, as everybody did, and you know, how to rearrange your rows so complexly. And Don Byers, who was a great friend and encourager, said, you know, why do you want to write like that for? And I said, I just want to make ugly noises. And he blinched. I said, you want to make ugly noises? What happened to beauty? And the story of my life has been going from making ugly noises into making beautiful noises. And now I don't mind what the sounds are that I make, provided that in the air they ring with a certain beauty of consonants, by which I don't mean making consonant sounds, but just that the sounds in the air are beautiful to the ear rather than ugly to the eye and the ear and the body. And you know, but when one is young and brash, one wants to make ugly noises, and a lot of our young composers here in New Zealand are like that. They are afraid to make anything other than ugly noises. They're afraid that they'll be thought old-fashioned or being laughed at or not being up with the play, and that's still happening here. So New Zealand was still doing this sort of rather staged 12-tone stuff. The sounds that were being made in Europe when I arrived were still very much the total serial sounds, which Messiaen had started, and he had a knack of making them beautiful. Stockhausen had done to the nth possible degree. He was so German. Everything, every single variety of combination and variation had to go into his pieces. Everything went in, and it was utterly mathematical and thick and heavy and extremely difficult. And that was still dominating German music in the 60s and 70s. And then Stockhausen went into his phase of you know, when he broke up with his second wife, and he became all sort of Indian aesthete, and wrote these sort of strange improvisation poems and so on. And then things began breaking up completely, and going into different directions. But when I arrived on the scene, I wasn't doing all that. I was just making pure sound and trying to figure out ways of writing down things that had never been written down before. And I think they found that utterly fascinating. It wasn't really for about 20 years or more after I got back that people started making what I considered interesting music. And then another 20 years, just about, on from there, almost everything New Zealand's doing are fascinating, really thinking about sounds and character of musical material and different ways of making music, and being unafraid to have mixtures of consonant with dissonant and striking with calming and so on. It's much more interesting being a New Zealander now than it was.